let's now focus on a fascinating development in Uganda, where sadly we have a situation where there are no women on the presidential candidates list. Uganda is heading to those elections to elect a new president in 2026. And the road to the polls has been shaped, and political analysts say that history is repeating itself. For the first time in decades, there'll be no woman candidate vying for the position of president to challenge long-serving President Yoweri Museveni. The country's closed nominations for the January vote, and it's an all-male race. Now, this morning, we ask why that is. Why are women not on the ballot? And why didn't they get nominated for the country's next president? Well, we speak to one woman who ran for nomination, Hopeful Mpambara, who's a social justice lawyer, activist and advocate. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and welcome. We spoke not so long ago on the Channel Africa podcast, and you put your name in the hat, and you were very hopeful, very excited. And it's not gone to plan. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for hosting me in Africa. It's good to see you again, Peter. And I know we spoke just a few days back, actually a few weeks ago. Things have changed, but I hope we can have a very diverse and detailed conversation today, especially following the outcomes of a very disappointing verification process of the Electoral Commission here in Uganda.
Well, let's talk about that verification process. What happened? Why didn't you get through?
There was a very, very tough process. Maybe let me begin by introducing myself for those who might have just streamed in. My name is Hopeful Mpambara. I was an aspiring presidential candidate just a few days ago. The process got done last Wednesday. But we went through a very intense, or what I would call a very vigorous exercise in terms of getting voter supporter verification. And this was supposed to be in form of getting supporters from different districts in the country to endorse us to run for presidency. So from the onset of what we observed, it was a process that was already bent on trying to discriminate certain categories of Ugandans from ably participating. I'll take an example of myself. There are so many times when we were in these diverse districts that we were actually being hijacked with our different coordinators. And due to the fact that we knew that we couldn't be able to travel to all the districts in the country, definitely because we are young people that are limited by resources, we tried our best to use some of the networks that we have on ground and in grassroots to be able to get to all the different voters to be able to endorse us to run for presidency. So under the Ugandan law, we are required to get at least 2/3 of endorsement from the country. And that alludes to about 98 districts in Uganda to be able to endorse you. So from what we noticed from the onset, we were being hijacked for majority of the time, especially at the beginning for me. My supporter forms, people who were voting on to endorse me were getting hijacked and stolen. And in the very first 2 weeks of me running this process, I was robbed of 45 districts. To the point that by the third time this same thing happened, it was in the final week towards verification of us running for presidency, towards being nominated. So I was among the last candidates actually handing my supporter forms, and that's after 3 times of struggling with the government state machinery trying to set me back and not run. That was not just all, but when we reached the verification process that is handled by the Electoral Commission of Uganda, we again suffered other setbacks in form of these people were not even willing to go through these files and look through properly. They were just flipping through pages and telling us, these are not verified, these are null and void, we're not willing to accept your files, you have to go back. I had to go through the process 3 times before they could allow me to submit my forms to the Electoral Commission for proper verification to be considered to be nominated. And later, when I was discussing these issues with other women, they told me they went through the exact same thing. So it means that the system, the process was already trying to exclude us from actually actively participating and meaningfully participating. That was just not it. Again, security agencies were at the helm of making sure that they were trying to reach out to anyone who had tried to endorse any woman on that ballot to intimidate them and asking them, why did you sign to endorse this woman to run for presidency? It was not fair. It was a very, very horrifying process. It was traumatizing. And at the helm of it, we feel excluded. We feel discriminated against in this country. We are bitter. We are very bitter.
Why are women targeted in this way? Is it patriarchy? What is it? Are they fearful that you might actually get voted for?
There's an intentional retention of power. At the helm of it, they constantly assure us that inclusion is at the helm of Uganda's democracy. But what we've seen just from this concluded verification process of nominations and etc. from the Electoral Commission and from the country at large, we've been shown that actually the role of women in governance does not matter. It's irrelevant. Because the way they were really trying to discriminate women from running this particular time was very obvious. It was obvious. They were trying to discriminate us from participating completely. We had already put in so many of these complaints and complained that every single cycle, every election cycle, a woman barely makes it. And the one woman that makes it in the last 4 decades have also complained that the process is intentional about sidelining them. They fight, they struggle, and at the helm of it, even when they run, at the end of it, their votes are stolen, they are rigged, and they give them false election results. So it's an intentional retention of power. It is actually a move to show Ugandan women that despite being the biggest voting bloc in the country, we make about 58% of the electorate that votes every single election cycle. We are the biggest number that votes. We are being shown that our representation doesn't matter, that power is not willing to be shared amongst people, that it's not a Uganda that works for all. It is a very intentional retention of power.
If I remember correctly, you were running as an independent. It sounds to me like you almost need the resources of a political party. Is that another exclusionary thing, that if you don't have financial muscle or the support of a big party, it becomes very difficult to make advances, particularly if you're a woman?
That definitely is it as well. We realized that also there was an intentional exclusion of anyone who was running as an independent candidate. And we realized that they were intentionally concentrating on political parties, and that those are the ones that got nominated to end up on the final ballot for presidency. We believe that, again, this is intentional retention of power, because majority of women that exist in political party structures, again, do not have any decision-making power. They're either running as running mates to men, or they are in the system in a different way that does not have the top seat final decision-making power. So again, for them to concentrate on political parties, it was an intentional decision, because they know there's no woman who is in a top structure in any political party that will be able to compete and be able to make decisions at that particular level. Sorry, I've just turned on the video.
How do you think things can change? Because what it sounds like is you may be 58% of the electorate, but you'll never be able to vote for a woman, because a woman will never make the ballot.
Is it okay now?
Yes, we can hear you now, loud and clear. Did you get?
But you can see me as well?
We can carry on. I'm sure they're going to catch up with the video now.
All right. You asked about resources and why that is one of the reasons that we do not get endorsed.
I've moved on a little bit now to your 58% of the electorate, but I guess it means nothing, because if a woman's name is not on the ballot, that mass number of women can't vote for a woman.
They cannot, because again, there are so many biases that exist in terms of elections, and especially in terms of women participating in governance structures. The biases are that women are not capable leaders because that is how society has framed so many things. We come from a very patriarchal society that has for a long time made women believe that they're not able leaders, which has shown through different diverse ways that women are not capable of leadership. One of the challenges I didn't mention to this particular channel last time was that women face barriers in terms of resources, because already we are the marginalized groups that do not have enough resources to be able to ably run some of these campaigns. But then it also reaches the fact that, on top of not having those resources, people are not willing to support you in terms of resources because they are worried about investing in someone who they know is likely not to make it. There are so many women who are capable of leadership, but they do not have the able support, the viable support to be able to run ably at the same level as men, because men for a long time have had a head start to be able to have these resources that women do not. And for women like me, who I assume have just a small little percentage of privilege to be able to participate in such a process, I have been shown that it's the same thing. Because for a country that has largely monetized politics to a level where even voters are being bribed with small amounts of shillings as much as 5,000, or they are being bought for soap or cooking oil to take to their homes, it becomes an intentional process that is meant to bribe every single person to be able to win them over. So for most of us that enter attempting to run this process on merit, that is not based on monetary resources, that is not based on maybe large influence that majority of these people already have, it becomes a very complicated process for us to even go through the very fast verification stages. So it's still a very intentional power move to exclude women, because again, they know for resources we are the largely disfranchised group, but also for majority of Ugandans who cannot afford to run on large resources, to run on this unsustainable level of monetization of politics, it becomes a complicated debate for us to ever think of leadership or to ever think about entering leadership structures. It's not sustainable for us. It's not sustainable for the electorate. It's not sustainable for Ugandans to continue running on this very pace of what governance has been structured to be.
How are you feeling now? You were pretty optimistic and excited going into this process. Are you disillusioned now? How are you feeling?
I am feeling very disappointed in the process because despite how many reports we've read that most times some of these processes are not fair and just, witnessing it for yourself is something else. We went through such a rigid process, and I've been telling people that especially for a young candidate like me, it's very disheartening to learn that these are the kind of structures we are trying to deal with to be able to push for good governance in Uganda. But nonetheless, we have entered the structures, we've anchored ourselves. This is just the beginning of the journey. So our plan is to keep pushing until we make sure that, more women are viable for the presidency seat. We've not given up. It's our time now to start pushing again. And no matter how many times the system tries to push us down, we are willing to push back as hard as possible. So much as I'm disheartened, I'm also very optimistic that there are so many opportunities for us to push forward, for us to push more women to recognize our role as the biggest voting bloc, to get in there and start pushing for their representation. Because if we do not break the barriers around how men are structuring power right now, there's no opportunity for women to run even in the coming election cycles. And as we can see, they do not care that there's no woman on the ballot, despite the fact that so many times we are bullied and harassed and told that there's no point of you being on the ballot because you're not going to win. But we ask them the same question, that you're constantly lamenting that Museveni is not going to lose. So how come you also try to be on the ballot? What is the difference between a woman being on the ballot and Bobby Wine being on the ballot, yet you're constantly lamenting that there's no possibility of them winning because Museveni is likely to win? So why is it women that have to be pushed out?
Let's talk a little bit about that then. You said that Bobby Wine is allowed on the ballot and women aren't. Given the odds are heavily stacked against you and anybody, in fact, even a man, was your inclusion on the ballot more symbolic than a real threat? Is it just that it would be important to have a woman on the ballot, given what's almost a given consequence of what's going to happen this election? Or did you genuinely think that you could win this election?
We genuinely believe we stand a chance just as much as anyone that gets on the ballot, because we've built enough power as well on ground to make sure that we can push, to make sure that we are heard. We have very valid points for the reasons why we are running. We have strong manifestos that we know people are going to listen to and become convinced that it's actually time for a woman to lead this country. We continuously convince people that if women have nurtured so many other aspects of other sectors of this country, it is also time for them to be able to nurture this country back to itself. So it's not just about symbolism, it's also about us pushing just as much to make sure that we can win the electorate over and they recognize the potential that we have to capably run this country. So it's not just symbolic. We know we have just as much potential to run this candidacy and win it just as much as any other person on that ballot. It's just that so many of these comments come from people, of course, who are intentionally trying to relegate us from the sidelines to push us out, because they know the power that women have. The minute they come together and young people come together to push for someone to win this presidency, they would. So they know it's not just symbolic. They know we are just as capable, and it's a reason why they're intimidated to keep women off that ballot. But we knew that we're able competitors. We knew that we're capable of leading this country just as well as any other man that was put on that ballot.
Patriarchy, I guess, is a given, sadly, on the continent. But were there women who also discouraged you?
There were definitely a number of women, and of course, it comes from the same biases. We all live in the same patriarchal society. We all carry some of these biases sometimes. So at times, we try to understand, but also at the helm of it is trying to, we've done our best to convince so many categories of Ugandans that we carry a very good alternative vision for this country just as well as any other man that appeared on that ballot. But majority of the women were very supportive and were very appreciative of that, especially for a young candidate like me that had just entered the political space. They were very encouraging. They supported. They trained me. They were trying to support in all forms as much as possible. So I don't want to allude to the vision, or sorry, to the illusion that patriarchy carries around that women do not support other women. I have been well supported. Majority of my support came from women, and I'm very grateful that we were able to actually have a united front on that matter. But it's unfortunate how the results turned out.
What can be done? What needs to be done to change this so that we're not having this conversation again in 5 years' time?
We are going to push for certain electoral reforms, because if we consistently say women are sidelined because of the unfair biases that have existed for centuries in a country like Uganda, and we're not doing anything about it for women to ably participate, then it means there's a problem. Because if we continue to cry about meritocracy, but we know that systems are biased against women ably running, then it means that no woman will ever get on the ballot. So what we're trying to push for is the Electoral Commission to revise some of its policies to make sure that at least women are highly considered, or are considered to a certain level or a certain percentage, to be able to represent or to be able to participate meaningfully in some of these governance structures, rather than just preach about meritocracy, well knowing that there's a structure, there's a system here that does not ably that does not favor women to actually participate because of certain different biases and certain discriminatory tendencies that have come from institutionalized oppression. But also, it's at the same time, we're going to push for a certain level of unity with women to make sure that we can be able to provide certain forms of economic empowerment that goes beyond just resources of trainings, just resources of certain things, but to actual funds. Because one of the issues that majority of us women faced was the fact that we did not have able financial assistance to be able to run some of these processes. You realize that for a process that seems small, like collecting those supporter forms from different districts, you need resources. Despite having a very diverse network, you need resources that are minimally about 5,000 US dollars. That's not a small amount for someone like me to just come up with and be able to inject into this system. So we need to be able to have those grants, those incentives in place to make sure that we can work with so many women that are trying to vie for these positions. Because if we don't do it at a united front, we continue to be the ones that are sidelined. But also, due to the fact that we faced certain levels of violence, I don't want to go without saying it. There are so many levels of objectification. There were so many levels of technology facilitated violence, especially against female candidates. The levels of bullying and harassment we were facing were not the same as what men were going through. And you could see that there was an intentionality to really neutralize our power to run as able candidates, because people are more willing to concentrate on how we look like, or how we are shaped, or our physical appearances, rather than the ideas and the vision that we have for this country. So it's important for this country to consider putting stronger laws, especially around election periods, that cut down on the kind of violence that women continue to face, not just in the fields of work, but online, and in terms of how they engage. Patriarchy is such a disease, like you've said, because for the majority of the time I was in these spaces, there were men that were trying to do all kinds of things, trying to invite
Right,
me for late
right.
night dinners,
What?
calling me words like sweetheart, darling, someone who in a big media space telling me I have nice lips during an interview. It's very disrespectful, and we need to be able to put a stop to it.
Wow. That's incredible. Is there anyone that you're backing now that your nomination hasn't gone through? Is there anyone that you're pushing your weight behind?
I'm definitely pushing my weight behind a collaboration between Bobby Wine and General Mugisha Muntu, because those are two aspirational people I feel obligated to actually look toward to. They carry a very strong vision for this country, and I feel that a collaboration between them it would mean something for Ugandans, because we've been trying to see a united opposition that comes together to be able to face this ruling regime that has assured itself that it's here for life. So we need them to unite. And I've said this on a space. I said this on a different conversation just last week, and told them that if we need to unite, we're putting our force behind them to push. But then again, we need to also see them unite in terms of pushing for women's involvement at every level, and not just on spaces or positions that are below them as men.
Yvonne, I'm so sorry about the outcomes of your own presidential ambitions, but thank you so much indeed for joining us, and we wish you the best in terms of the work that you still need to do to change the political landscape in the country, so that it becomes a norm for every little girl in the country to dream one day and have a realizable dream of becoming president. Thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Peter.
That's Yvonne Mpambara, who was a presidential candidate. She was running for nomination, and due to the challenges that she's talked to us about now, did not make the final list. And we'll keep a track of her story and other females. Ugandan women have been nominated before, and some made the final list, but always lost to Yoweri Museveni. But now no women at all. Is that an indicator that gender equality is regressing in Uganda? If you want to know a little bit more about Yvonne Mpambara, we did a podcast with her a few weeks ago, and so you can go on to our YouTube channel and look for the interview that I did with her. So it'll give you a bit more background about her as an individual, and some of the hopes and ambitions that she had leading up to this nomination process. It's 8:31. Here are your news headlines with Jwalani Tulongwepe.